Welcome to the Leadership Art Podcast. This is designed to share stories from inspiring leaders and help you on your own leadership journey. Art Robbins, you usually sit in the interview chair, so I'm excited to switch roles today. And you led in consulting, entrepreneurship, and now through the Leadership Art platform. And today I would like to explore your leadership journey and how it's shaped your philosophy and what leading with purpose actually means to you. But before we begin, I would love to briefly introduce myself. And my name is Julia Junestrand, and I'm originally from Stockholm, Sweden, and moved to Copenhagen for my studies, where I'm currently pursuing my master's degree at Copenhagen Business School. This semester, I've had the pleasure to do exchange at USC in the MBA program. And that's actually how I met you, Art, since you came in as a guest speaker in one of my classes. And I am someone who's more naturally introverted, but I've always been fascinated by leadership and the influence it can actually have on people's life. And being here in the US, I wanted to use this opportunity to focus on leadership and what it means to lead with confidence and with purpose. And that's why I also feel very honored that you, Art, wanted me to be part of this episode with you. And like I briefly said, you have led in teams in consulting, built companies, and advised leaders across industries. But I think we should start from the beginning. What early experiences most shaped your understanding of what leadership should be?
Well, first of all, thank you for that intro, Julia. I really appreciate it. And it's great to have you as a guest host as we do a different format for this. And I'm excited to share my own experiences with our listeners. And in fact, I don't know if there's more pressure being a host or a guest, but I guess we're going to find out in the
Yeah, exactly.
next few minutes here, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I guess you're asking some of my early experiences and what shaped my leadership. I guess I didn't start off in the business world thinking about being a leader. When you're in school and you're looking to define a career, you're really focusing on things that you're interested in. And
Yeah.
I've always been interested in technology and innovation and exploring new things. That's what I wound up studying. I wound up studying at the time, they called it computer science. It's all high-tech digital work that we do now. I explored that and went to school and focused on projects in there. And my early jobs were in that field. I decided actually to pursue a career in consulting because I always liked the variety and seeing different things. And I thought that I could gather a broader range of experiences and firsthand visibility to use cases if I went into the consulting profession. And that was really a valuable experience for me
Yeah.
because that really played out. And as a result of doing projects, I think I started to see different aspects of leadership. I could even go back, you talk about going back to the beginning. I don't know how far back I can even remember, but if I just even go back to business school, in Harvard Business School, they were a big proponent of the case study method and big proponent of creating study groups with
Yeah.
your fellow peers. And you were forced to, it was required to identify a team of 3 or 4 other students with different backgrounds, and you get together every evening and work on the cases. And what was interesting about that is that it really developed a mindset how important teamwork was, how important collaboration was, how important, having a diversity of experiences and ideas. You couldn't possibly do all the work they gave you on your own. And even if you tried, it wouldn't come out that good because you only knew so much, and
Yeah.
you really needed to know this much. So they indoctrinated that, just doing it day by day.
Yeah.
You come out with that mindset. And while you're doing it, you don't realize how valuable it is. But then when you get into the business world and you realize how comfortable, you've become with
Mhm.
exercising those principles, you look back and say, oh, that's why they put us through that torture. I get
Yeah.
it now.
Did you naturally take a leadership position in those group works, or did you have a more like passive role when you were in business school at Harvard?
Yeah, probably to be brutally honest, I was
Mhm.
probably more on the passive end of the spectrum than on the active end of the spectrum. I was one of the younger students. I had 2 years of experience. I mean, there were people there with 5, 6, even 7 years.
Yeah.
Um,
I can definitely relate to that.
You can relate to that. I
Yeah.
mean, it's tough. I mean, it's overwhelming. And, I think I learned that I was always really good with math and being the number cruncher, the techie guy. So I really tried to at least establish a reputation that, hey, if you need someone to handle this stuff, I'm your go to person for
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
So
That makes sense.
just tried to catch up with everyone else. So I think looking back, I held my own, but I think there's a lesson in there that, whatever situation you're in, you're not going to know everything. And you do have to establish your reputation. You do have to gain respect. You do have to gain credibility. So really focus on the things, you do well and do an outstanding job of that. And at the same time, try to learn other things. And, that was one of the great things about the consulting projects, because we used to have this saying that, you're going to go into a consulting project not knowing everything there is to know. I'll never tell a client that, by the way. I think everyone, all of our listeners who are consultants say, oh, yeah, that's true. And the clients say, yeah, I found that out the hard way. But seriously, if you come to a project needing to know four things, you might know three of those four things. And then you learn the fourth thing on the project. And then you
Yeah.
go to the next project knowing four things. And you might have to learn a fifth or a sixth thing on the next project. But that's how you grow. You build on your base of knowledge and you aspire to learn other things.
100%. And then now you have talked a bit about your early career and also in business schools. Was there ever a mentor or a role model that played a significant role and had a meaningful impact on you that you would like to share?
Yeah. I'd say there were a couple. I mean, I was really lucky early on to work for some great companies. I mean, the first company I worked for called American Management Systems, and they since got merged into a larger consulting company. But at the time, it was actually founded by five of probably some of the smartest people on the planet. They came out of the Defense Department in the 1960s. They're actually part of what they called the whiz kids at the time. So I don't know if any of them had an IQ of less than 200. But seriously, they weren't just smart. I mean, they were very personable. They understood the value of people. And the chairman of the group, the leader, that was a gentleman named Ivan Selin. And Ivan had an incredible memory and he was very smart. He really cared about people. And what made an impression on me is we weren't a humongous consulting company, but at the time I joined, we were still, I think, about 400 people. So that's a lot of people. Ivan knew everybody in the company. He knew your name, he knew your level, he knew the department you worked in, and he even knew what project you were on. And if you were in the office and you walked down the halls, he would say, hey, Art, how's that energy project going in Denver? And
That's so impressive.
it was so impressive. And it made a real lasting impression on me of the value of that he really cared because he wasn't just asking like a computer robot. He really cared about the
Yeah.
project and he really cared how you were doing. And if you looked at the operating model of AMS at the time, they actually put in a lot of human resource elements that were focused on attracting and retaining the top talent, developing people, educating them, exposing them to new skills, advancing their careers, having them share in the wealth of the business, having the right KPIs and incentive programs along the way. I mean, the whole operating model tied together so nicely. And it wasn't one of these situations you had uncontrollable growth like you see with a lot of these tech companies. I mean, it was a fiscally responsible company. They grew at a measured pace. The people were rewarded. And even if the people left the company, they all moved on to bigger and better jobs. So it was something when you're in your early years and you're just learning how should a business work? I think I was really blessed to just get exposed to all that early on. And I tried to convey and advance those principles in my other roles as I moved forward.
Yeah. Do you think that your leadership philosophy of it, that it should be purpose driven, was created already back then? Or do you think that there was a turning point throughout your career where it more shifted? Or do you think you have always had that with you from the beginning, from when you started working with them?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely an evolution. I would have to say I've definitely become more purpose driven over time. Back when I entered the business world, I don't even think there was a phrase purpose driven. Maybe people called it nonprofit.
Yeah.
They viewed it as one or the other, right?
Yeah.
As much money as you can, or you're going to be
Mm.
purpose driven. And
Yeah.
obviously, that's not true, and that's not the case these
No.
days.
And
Um,
can you also maybe share how you define purpose now and what it means to you?
Yeah, I think purpose is advancing something that's really important to you. That doesn't just benefit you, but it benefits others, and it benefits your community, society, the world. And it's something that you're really passionate about. And, business is a great vehicle to make that happen because you do need money to
Yes.
advance a purpose, and you need capital to
Mhm.
advance a purpose. And what better way than through companies that generate wealth? And I define wealth not just as earnings per share, but wealth takes so many different forms. It takes forms of philanthropy, it takes forms of helping people, of developing people, of increasing the contribution that individuals can make to society. I mean,
Yeah.
these are all elements of wealth that can be manifested through successful businesses. And
Mhm.
I think it's great that purpose driven is an active topic and an active objective, because I think this is what ultimately differentiates long term successful businesses from those that struggle.
Yeah. So now you've also talked a little bit about prioritizing developing people. And can you maybe share a moment where you had to prioritize developing people over hitting the immediate target for the company? And what did that teach you? Or have you ever been in a situation like that?
Well, it's a balancing act. And I can understand why you're asking the question, because there are a lot of companies out there that think very short term, right? And
Exactly.
you hear about layoffs and say, oh, we got to cut thousands of people to hit our earnings per share target this quarter. So I think it's really important to know what your purpose is. Because at the end of the day, when you're faced with each of those decisions, you need to do the right thing. And the right thing might be a balance. And how do you know what the right thing is? Well, I think to be an effective leader, you have to know yourself. You have to have a high level of self awareness. You need to know what's right and what's wrong. You need to know what direction your compass is pointing in. And sometimes you might have to move the compass a little bit to the right and a little bit to the left,
Yeah,
depending on the facts and the circumstance. But if you don't know that stuff, how can you make the right decision? You know,
I
uh,
agree.
it's
But do you have any recommendations that maybe for someone who's young in their career, how do you get to know yourself in a leadership position? Like, do you have any tips or tricks that you used of getting to know yourself and understand the way you led?
Yeah, well, it's a journey.
Yeah.
And I wish I knew what I know now, maybe 20, 30 years ago. Maybe it would have been a lot easier, but it probably wouldn't have been as fun. If you talk to professional athletes,
Hmm.
they enjoy the practicing and the prep as much as the actual game or competition themselves.
Yeah.
I think you have to enter the business world recognizing that it is a journey, and you have to make a commitment to yourself to observe and learn and be prepared to fail and be prepared to be vulnerable, but recognize that even with failure, there are things to learn. And, look at all the entrepreneurs. No entrepreneur hits it the first time. They go through a lot of failures, but it gives them the resolve to keep going. And each time they approach the next opportunity smarter.
Hmm.
But the key is to have the right mind frame, to have the confidence in yourself that it's a journey, it's a learning experience. I know what I want to accomplish. If I fail this time, I'm going to take the time to identify what I could have done better, what I did right that I have to do more of. And you apply that, to the next opportunity. I mean, the
Yeah.
trick is to be out there. I just listened to a podcast by Professor Scott Galloway. I'm a big admirer of him, and he was talking about the struggles that young people are having and the level of depression. And, especially a lot of young males, they're very frustrated with the opportunities and even the whole generation. Why is this generation not doing as well as their parents here in the US? And, he said a lot of it, people are just like reverting to their screens and their phones and their computer games. They're not getting out there. They're not
No.
socializing. They're not developing relationships. And I think it's really important, as you go into your career journey to make a commitment to get out and do things and meet people and develop
Yeah.
relationships because that's how opportunities happen. That's how you learn. That's how you advance. That's how you get personal fulfillment. That's how you build confidence in yourself. And, one of the things I think I've realized over time that it's okay if people say no to you. It's okay if people don't like you, because, at
Yeah.
the end of the day, well, maybe these aren't the people you want to work with anyway. You want to work with people who share your values. They may not agree with all of your opinions, but opinions are at a lower level than values and principles. And, you really want to surround yourself with people who share those common values and principles. So, how do you find them? You have to push yourself to get out there and expose yourself to situations and know where your compass is to say, hey, these are the situations and communities I want to invest more time in, and these are the ones I want to stay away from.
Yeah, I agree. And when talking about that and finding the people that you like to work with and that you can uplift and that they can uplift you, when you have moved out through different kind of industries, what part of your leadership philosophy travels with you through those industries and what parts do you see as not as universal as the other ones?
Well, industry is interesting. I mean, especially as people are looking to advance their careers, industry knowledge there's a lot of weight placed on it. But I think it's important to recognize that even though for many positions, industry knowledge may be required, mandatory, it's not sufficient, to ultimately attain the highest levels of leadership. You need skills beyond just the industry knowledge, organizations. I mean, there's a whole set of soft skills
Mm-hmm.
that are necessary that often get underplayed. I mean, a lot of people complain about recruiting and say, well, why did they hire me? I'm a good person. They put so much emphasis on industry or have you already done this? Maybe it's not good to have someone in a job that's done exactly that. Maybe you want someone who has enough skills, but also some different skills to bring some fresh perspectives to the
Yep.
job. So that's a real dilemma. I mean, in consulting, you go from situation to situation. You do get exposed to different industries. And bringing in perspectives from a new industry to a client that may just be rooted in his own industry can be extremely valuable because industries operate at different paces. Industries have different best practices, and there may be some best practices that are standard in one industry that haven't been adopted in another industry. An early adopter of that in the second industry can become a market leader if they have a broader perspective.
Yeah, and now you also talked a bit about that it's important with the soft skills. But how do you actually balance like being open and human and with the decisiveness that might be expected of senior leaders? Have you experienced that? Have you had any issues with balancing that, or has it been pretty straightforward? Do you have any tips?
Yeah, well, again, I think here's another misperception that's out there. I mean, people sometimes equate, oh, if you're exercising soft skills, you're a soft leader. We need a strong leader. We need a results-oriented leader. These two things are not mutually exclusive. You could have effective soft skills and you can be a driver. You can
Yeah.
be an aggressive leader. You can set lofty goals for the team. You can inspire and push the team. It's possible. I mean, we've done it. We've had guests. We had a great guest, General Laura Yeager, who exhibited that. She had great people skills and she led, an Army infantry division and got great results in times of stress and crisis and combat. So I think especially this day and age, it's
Yeah.
important to have the soft skills to be able to connect with the people, to be able to earn their respect, to get them to buy into the vision, accept the role, and get them inspired, not just to do what they're told, but to go above and beyond and bring their full potential to work to get an even greater result. And that's done through soft skills. That's not done through directives and orders. Giving directives doesn't require any skill. You could actually hire a CEO at minimum wage and just have them bark out orders to everyone. That doesn't take any skill. You won't get the results. It'll be a disaster. But if you really want a talented leader that can achieve long-term sustained results, they have to bring that humanity to the job. They have to bring the listening skills, the empathy, the critical thinking, the connectedness, personability with the employees. One thing I learned, and this really came to light after a conversation I had with an ex-employee. It was some number of years after I had moved on, he had moved on, and I ran into him. This is when I was leading consulting globally at Frost and Sullivan. And we used to have monthly all hands meetings, and I would always give an update of what was going on, what the state of the business was, what was exciting, and so forth. And sometimes the news was good, sometimes the news was bad. I always tried to be honest with people. And even if we were going through a couple of rough patches, I'd always try to show them, hey, here's the path of how we're going to deal with this, how we're going to get out of it, how we're going to get back on track, et cetera, et cetera. And this senior analyst who I met afterwards said to me, I always enjoyed your all hands meetings. And I remember it because he always used to sit in the front row and he was always giving me a positive body language. And I said, really, what did you like about the all hands meetings? What did I say that made you like them so much? And he said to me, Art, I got to be honest with you, I don't remember a single thing you said. And I said, what? And he said, I don't, but I do remember how you made me feel. And you made me feel really good about the company. Whatever was going on, whether the news was generally good or bad or uncertain or this or that, I always walked out of the room feeling better than when I walked in, and then, okay, here's what I have to do to help the company achieve its goals. And that conversation made a real impression on me. And when I talked with some other leaders, they had similar experiences. What people remember is how you make them feel.
That's
And
so inspiring. And
yeah.
honestly, very refreshing also to hear that an honest way of presenting things can be that impactful on other people.
And sometimes you don't even realize it when you're doing it. You might say something. I mean, looking for the right thing to say, you might say something very simple. I was mentoring a student at one of the new venture competitions, and they didn't win. They didn't even make the finals. There were like, 8 teams in the finals. They didn't even make the finals. But the guy who was the CEO of the company, I mean, he was a really talented guy. And I said, hang in there, stick with it. It's going to work out. And then the next year, He was on a team and they won the grand prize.
That's so exciting.
And I went to the competition. It was at UCI. It was the Stella Jean competition. Stella was one of our great guests on the podcast. And the team that won the grand prize, after the ceremony, my mentee came up to me and he brought the rest of his team and he thanked me. And I said, well,
Fair.
why do you thank me? I mean, you want to by yourselves this year? And he said, no, no, no. What you said to me last year, you told me to stick with it.
Yeah.
And that really made an impression on me, and I stuck with it. And
Hmm.
look, we won the grand prize. I had no idea that little statement had that impact on him. But that's the power of leadership. There may be many things that we do that we never get visibility to, that we never get feedback on, but it's had an effect on people's lives.
Yeah, I agree. So, based on this, and now that I've listened to your podcast a bit, I would really like to know what inspired you to launch the Leadership Art podcast.
Oh my goodness. Well, leadership is so important. I mean, I
Mhm.
think that goes without saying. And to be perfectly honest, the past few years, I've seen so many examples of poor leadership that are getting so much attention. And it seems like often the loudest, most boisterous, most controversial instances of leadership are just consuming the airways, whether it's television, the internet, podcasts. And, when I've talked to people, and especially young people, because I work with a lot of early stage companies, I mentor at universities, lecture
Yeah.
at universities. I see a lot of young people who've gotten very discouraged. It's like, if I want to be a successful leader, do I have to behave that way? Is that what I have to do in order to be recognized? I don't want to do that. Is that necessary? And the answer is, of course not. You shouldn't behave that way. You should be yourself. You should be purpose driven because
Mhm.
in reality, there are so many examples of great leadership out there that are purpose driven, thoughtful, and display humanity and great leadership skills. But they often don't get the attention, and maybe because it's not marketable, they don't get the attention that the loud leaders do.
Yeah.
So when I'm talking with people in my network about this, they said, Art, you should do something about this. You have a lot to say. You have great experiences of great leadership, and you know people who are also great, inspiring leaders. So, well, why don't you do something like a podcast and get the word out and give it visibility, give it airtime?
Yeah.
And that's basically how it happened. And the irony of it is, before this year, I never even listened to a podcast.
That's so fun.
Spotify didn't even know who I was. Uh, and I started to look into it and said, I think I could do this. It was sort of in the spirit of doing new and different things and not being afraid to try something new. So we said, let's do a pilot. Let's do 4 episodes. We'll see how it goes. If it gets a good response, we'll do more. And
Yeah.
that's exactly what happened. So we did our pilot, got great feedback from both the guests and the listeners. So we committed to a full second season, about a dozen episodes, and we're off and running. And, I just saw that they had the Spotify Wrap issued the other day, and we were actually ranked very high in categories. We were in the top 25% of ranked podcasts and the top 10% of shared and commented podcasts. And it's only our first year. So
That's so exciting.
yeah, we were very, very excited about that. We were very, very pleased. So I think we're doing something right and we want to keep going.
Yeah. And thank you for giving purpose driven leadership a voice, because I personally find it very useful as someone early in my career. And then I also wanted to ask you, now that you've had the podcast for 2 seasons, do you feel like you've been able to achieve the missing points that you found before and achieve the things you wanted with it?
Well, I think so far we have, but there's still a lot to do. I mean, we want to get our audience up. We want to have more of an impact We've been very fortunate to have some great guests, and we're starting to have potential guests reach out to us asking if they could
Very fun.
participate, which is great. And one of the big things we want to do in 2026 is to get sponsorship, because that will allow us to broaden our reach and connect with more groups and communities and associations. So, anyone out there interested in sponsorship, love to talk to you. We have a great group of listeners who are aspiring leaders who are very interested in these topics and other means of career advancement to help them with their own purpose-driven mission.
Yeah. And maybe for all our listeners, is there coming a season 3?
Yes, there is. We're finishing up season 2. We actually have a backlog of episodes we recorded that'll go into early 2026. But yes, we are planning a season 3, which should launch sometime in the spring of 2026.
So
I
exciting.
hope, I hope that's considered good news.
Very good news.
Great, great.
And Art, thank you so much for sharing your story and your philosophy of leadership. You always draw out great stories from other leaders, so it was really exciting hearing your story today. And it's been a pleasure doing this and being your host for today. And thank you all so much for tuning in.
Well, Julia, thank you very much. It was a pleasure being in the other seat, and you did a great job. Come back and do it again.
Thank you. I will.